Thank you everyone for joining us this evening for our webinar. My name is Rahul Arora. I am Deputy General Manager Sales at HNI India. The session today brings us to the fifth such event that we have been doing in the last few months, and I feel glad to share with you that we have received a great response from the audience on our past sessions. The topic that we are discussing today is how do we collaborate in the times of social distancing? Aristotle, the great Greek philosopher, has rightly said that man by nature is a social animal. And so I'm sure in the last few months of this pandemic, one of the things that we have missed a lot is the times and the ways we used to collaborate with our colleagues and co-workers. Collaboration has become an integral part of our day-to-day work life. And today we are blessed that we have technology evolving so fast that we have multiple means to collaborate virtually while sitting at home with our colleagues and participate in such discussions as well. But once we go back to the office, what do we expect when it comes to the shared spaces or collaborative areas? We had all in our workplaces. Or what will happen to the shared offices? Will they remain same? Will they change? Or will they not be there at all? To answer these and many more questions, we have a great panel with us today. So without wasting much more time, let me introduce you to our panelists. In no particular order, on the panel, we have Nivi Gupta, Workplace Design Manager for APAC region at Facebook. In her current role, Nivi is responsible for leading design and standards for Facebook's APAC offices. She studied architecture and later facilities management and then started her work as an architect in Mumbai before moving to US for most of her career. In the US, Nivi worked on both public and private projects where she led commercial real estate projects to perform specification development, financial analysis, lease negotiations, furniture selection and procurement. A few years ago, Nivi returned to Asia and to the corporate world, first executing projects and now workplace and design strategies. Welcome, Nivi.
Thank you.
Next on the panel, we have Vistap, founder and managing director of architect Vistap and Associates. Vistap studied architecture from SPA New Delhi and then did MA in urban design from Oxford Brookes University, UK. He has diverse experience of working with a host of Indian and international clients, which includes multinational, corporates, hospitality, mixed use, and Fortune 500 companies. His firm AVA has completed more than 1,000 projects as of now. Vistap has also received several awards as an appreciation of his work in the field of architecture and interior design. Welcome, Vistap.
Thanks. Thank you. Lovely being here.
We have Nadeem Sheikh, NCO Manager South and Central Asia at IWG. Nadeem, with a key role at IWG, is responsible for new business center openings across South and Central Asia. Associated with IWG for more than 4 years now, Nadeem has delivered multiple new business centers in various formats, that is, Regis, Spaces, Signature, and HQ business centers. With a bachelor's degree in civil engineering, Nadeem has an overall experience of 16 years in corporate real estate, project management, and workplace strategy. Welcome, Nadeem.
Thanks, Rahul.
From HNI on the panel, we have Eric Johnson, who is part of our workplace advisory team in the US. Eric joined HNI Workplace Advisory Team in 2013, bringing a unique depth and scope of experience of 35 years of working as an architect, workplace strategist, and operations leader. Eric received an MA in Organization Development from Marymount University and a BS in Architecture from University of Virginia. Thank you for joining us, Eric. I hope you will not hate us for making you join this discussion so early in the morning.
No problem.
Lastly, from HNI on the panel, we have Michael Henningsen, Director of Global Accounts and Workplace. Michael has an experience of over 20 years in furniture, and he works with HNI's regional and global accounts to create great workplaces across multiple regions. Michael will be moderating today's session. So now I hand it over to you, Michael.
Great. Thanks, Rahul. And I want to sort of preface this is I know that a lot of times we come to these wanting to find some answers, but I think it's also important to also understand the right questions to ask. And so with your mind open, hopefully you may consider some new questions, rephrasing some questions or issues based on the discussion we're having here today. So to kind of get a baseline for where everybody's at right now, Rahul, can you put the first poll up? And this is, have you returned to the office? Have you gone back to the office? So as the audience, as the attendees are answering that, just a quick answer from the panelists. Eric.
As I said, I've been working away from the office for 20 years. I haven't worked in an office that long, so this is just more of the same.
Nivi.
Yes, we are slowly returning back, especially in the APAC region. But like our CEO announced, that we'll be working remotely till end of the year. We don't see ourselves going back to work until December, maybe only 25% of the workforce, a phased return.
Great. Nadeem.
So yes, so we have returned to office. So presently I'm sitting in my office at Powai, Mumbai. Because being in a business center company, you need to be in offices. So you see a lot of IWG employees working from offices. We've not seen footfall from clients to that extent that we may like, but slowly teams and clients are turning up to offices.
Bistap.
Yeah, so I'm in my office and we are part of the service sector. We have every reason to hold the flag and, walk ahead and, make everyone feel safe and happy. So I'm here. And so is my team.
And I forgot to answer this morning on this question, but you can probably see behind me, I'm in my office. And although the government has strongly encouraging us to work from home, so we mostly do work from home and only go in for very limited reasons. So let's see about the audience. Okay, so I think it's what we expected from what we've heard. 55% have gone back to the office. What was interesting is the last question, we are allowed to go back, but my company or I decided not to stay home. We did the same webinar this morning in Southeast Asia out of Singapore, and we had about 20% answered affirmatively on that question. So that was quite an interesting contrast. So I want to thank you for that. So I want to kind of take us to the year 2022. Let's imagine it's 2022. Considering in 2022 what has happened that we're living through now, the virus, the fallout, all these changes, what did it teach us and what are the most important or critical one or two things that we should be thinking about now? And so I'd like to start with Nadeem on this one.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. So the most important thing that has happened, what pandemic gave us is that we've stopped commuting to our offices. You see, most of the employees are working from home. They were working from home when the pandemic was at its peak. But that's not a bad thing. It's a good thing. We've seen that with the use of technology, working from home can be productive as well. However, a lot of employees like me who do not want to work from home or have situations of home where they cannot work from home. For us, I think going forward in the next year and a half, I think we will be looking at more of satellite offices, not necessarily wasting commuting time of an hour, couple of hours to reach headquarters, where normally headquarters have their employees based out of one building. I think going forward we will have more satellite offices, which will be used as the first address as a first office for most of the staff. You will see a lot of offices, smaller offices turning up near and closer in vicinity to residential suburbs. So that's what we think. Headquarters, I think going forward will be mostly kept reserved for larger team meetings, probably for taking strategic decisions, maybe for collaborative, maybe where collaboration is required. We feel that approximately around 50% of companies, except for companies and fields like who work in advertising, they require collaboration and spaces where they need to brainstorm with their teams. They require collaboration spaces much more than companies who can work from these smaller satellite offices. So I think that will go up. Secondly, I think usage of technology has been phenomenal during these pandemic times. So you will see platforms like Zoom, team meetings, all these platforms, doing much more better. These platforms will become much more efficient, and you will see a lot of employees using them to work in general. What will happen is a regular smartphone, a laptop and internet with these platforms will be, I think, going forward, the only most important things that will be needed to work productively. It may going forward, it may happen that commuting may come down drastically, and even if for HRs of companies, you will have a lot of employees, a lot of talent, asking them whether you've got offices closer to their residences, where they can work from, not necessarily working from their headquarters.
Great, thank you. Eric, 2022, what should we be thinking about?
Well, yeah, to pick up on some of the things that Nadeem just mentioned, obviously, if it's 2022 and businesses are continuing to be successful and grow, that means we have figured out how to work with people in many different locations. And as Nadeem mentioned, technology is going to be a big piece of that. And so it's not only are we going to be building the technology, but it's also we will have figured out how to train people to, quote, use the technology effectively, but also the tips and ways to make virtual work and virtual meetings more effective. You have to think about how you're managing them. We actually got that question yesterday. So setting up those protocols for how you make sure that people that are remote all feel connected to the meeting and connected to the organization. On that idea of connection, I think organizations, as people are more distributed and not everybody's coming into one place, creating that consistent user experience for their employees will be a big focus for organizations, regardless of where they are. And user experience is not just about place. That is definitely a piece of it. But it is about the technology, it's about the amenities, it's about feeling included, and that you can offer your ideas and questions moving forward. So I think that's going to be a big part of it as well. And that then also ties into a big thing we're talking about now is safety. We don't know what safety is going to mean physically in 2022. We can assume for the moment some of the same things we're going to be thinking about. But safety is also about, I can work remotely and it will not be have a negative impact on my career. And that will be a big change, particularly in North America. So organizations are really going to have to work with management and leadership and with their HR organizations to make sure that remote employees feel safe working remotely and it's not going to be negative for them moving forward.
Great, thank you. Nibby.
So, I mean, Nadeem and Eric covered a few points, but one biggest thing the virus and this change has taught us is that remote work can work. And I think Eric mentioned that too. And remote work has been around for many, many years, yet its growth has been very slow. Many companies have been skeptical, but I think COVID-19 forced us to all make it, and we realized that it can actually work. And they implemented it in a few weeks, some companies, and some companies like ours implemented it overnight. So, and it didn't take a few years like we all thought, right? Many tech companies have announced that 50% of their workforce will start working remotely in 5 years. That's what they say. However, it's not all in or an all out strategy. I mean, history has shown us that going 100% into the office or going 100% remote doesn't work for most organizations. It's going to be like a middle date. The survey shows it's going to be a middle, maybe 2 to 3 days. And I'm not sure about that, how many, but surveys will show more. So a few things that have changed forever, I think, is this has caused people to stop, think, and adopt. So adaptation is, I mean, people were so resilient in this whole COVID-19. They've just learned to adapt. It has caused people to explore new technologies, like Nadeem mentioned. I mean, that played a big role. And I think changed a lot of management styles and for a lot of companies. Everybody feels vulnerable, mindful, watchful. So that's been happening with different parts of the world. It's different. Few things other than what Nadeem and Eric mentioned, we should be thinking about of now and may do differently in 2022 is provide physical distancing, but at the same time manage social connection. That's going to be a hard one. The office will be used almost entirely as a place to make and collaborate, probably, because if you already have a home office, you'll come to office for make and collaborate maybe. Not necessary for my company, and I think Nadeem mentioned this, but a lot of surveys show the greater use of satellite. I think you talked about it, Nadeem, the near home working or something to that sort. Collaborative areas will be more on the focus kinds, collaboration between 2-3 people and smaller. There'll be more things will happen at your primary work setting, I mean at your desk, because if you're not allowed to go and collaborate in areas, things will be happening at your desk. So we need to think of ways to take care of that. But yeah, that's what it would be. Yeah.
Great. Pista.
Yeah, so I can just imagine, the year 2022, and I'm suffering from OCD. I'm, obsessive, and I have an obsessive compulsive disorder. I cannot stand people closer than 2 meters to me. I am using tissues to open doors, and I'm wearing a face mask when there are more people around. So I can imagine the situation. We're going to be so used to having the pocket sanitizer in our pocket and, cleaning our hands. So, on a lighter note, we're all going to change, in the space between our ears. But more seriously, I'd say there are 3 important things that I look at as, changes for the future. I think we're all going to appreciate the pace of life. We're going to have slowed down our lives from the kind of pace that we had in the past. And I think this entire thing of FOMO, the fear of missing out, I think we're going to be rid of that forever. I think we're all going to understand that, life happens in silos, and whether that silo is work from home today or it's partial resumption of work from office, we're going to be appreciating that, there's more to life. I mean, and we're going to be happy that we're alive. I mean, that's one of the main things. I think secondly, a lot of soul searching. I think a lot of companies, a lot of practices, small practices like mine have actually soul searched and seen what's the direction we're really going in. Is that, the sustainable direction? Are we all following a certain path, that is preordained, or are we, deliberately following that path? I'd say, soul searching for us is a big word actually in our office. So we call it sustainable, optimized, utilitarian, and livable. So, how can we progress to a direction that's, that's got soul more written around it, in so many ways. I think, future-proofing, ourselves from having understood what the virus has been, is something that we're all going to carry away with us years from now. And God forbid there's another virus attack, but, years from now, we're going to say we have been survivors. And that's my third point. I think we would have really proved Charles Darwin's theory. I mean, we are survivors. We have gone through the worst that could possibly hit us in every which way. And I think these are some of the things that we're going to carry with us. It's going to make us stronger people. We're going to be able to, our appetite for risk and our appetite to face disasters and situations that we've not seen before is going to be much stronger.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting, all your comments from discussions we've had and webinars we've had as well, and talking with clients, is that it, as Nivi was saying, it wasn't very much a shock to the system as we thought it would be. And the resiliency of everyone has really bubbled to the surface, and it's really fascinating to watch if you choose not to read certain things in the media. So we'd like to add, why don't you put the next poll up, Raul? Great. So as we're thinking about coming back to the office with all these new circumstances, what are the biggest challenges for shared spaces and collaboration in particular when you're coming back to the office? It's interesting. I read something today that was, we have often noted that, excuse me, preparing the workplace for the return of the people will be far easier than preparing the people for the return. And which I thought is quite interesting. And I think we're seeing a lot of that. I'll just bring it up now. Wall Street Journal had an article that ran over the weekend, and the headline was, "As offices reopen amid coronavirus, workers clash over masks, cubicle barriers, and Lysol." Clearly that's from America. So, but I think it's quite interesting, speaking to that point. We can do all the work to prepare the physical space and how you get there, but the people is sort of that unknown factor that we have to deal with and prepare. Do we have the results, Raul? Great, let's see what we got. Okay, the number one answer, the current collaborative settings don't work with physical distancing. And that's great to, I'm really happy to see that, because I think what it shows is self-awareness. That I think the people that are using the spaces are aware if it feels right or doesn't feel right. So I think I'm really pleased to see that one bubbled up to the surface. And then number one, we saw high in our webinar this morning, feeling unsure if it's safe to meet people face to face. That was actually the number one answer that we had on this morning's session. So I thought it's quite interesting. Nivi was talking with us earlier about, after this, looking at the contrast between the two webinars to kind of see what the differences were.
So Michael, I'd like to add a point here. I think, the biggest challenge really is the trust deficit that we have in our minds now. I mean, we cannot trust places. We cannot trust people to an extent. We cannot trust the food we are reaching out to. We cannot trust surfaces we are working on. So I think, that really is one of the biggest things. And that's why collaboration is the biggest challenge, that's come out in the polls.
Absolutely. So as we're thinking about the shared spaces and collaboration, as we're thinking about design considerations or other considerations that are different today than 3 or 4 months ago, we have to think about it differently. Nivi, I'd like to know from your perspective, because workplaces like yours have a lot of these sort of shared spaces. It's part of your DNA. How do you deal with what you have already as you're thinking about people coming back to the office?
So a lot of companies, including ours, have been finding out best ways to make do with what they have versus completely redesigning the office, right? I've personally attended tons of webinars, seen papers, recommendations from design firms, vendors, consultants, and furniture vendors have various products which they've come up with. And I guess I've been asking you too, right, Michael, what should we do and how should we do it? So rather than reconfigure or go about buying screens, maybe add more phone booths, privacy focused pods, that seems to be like options people are working with within the space and plan you have. For example, you have a 6 people work pod, and then you put in 2 meters apart, then you rethink how that will be used. You have to rethink collaboration and shared space. So most organizations, I think I've heard about having rotations with 2 groups alternating. Conference rooms will have capacity limits and common areas won't be available for congregation. So due to space constraints, physical distancing requirements, and potential demand, and collaborating with your team will generally still happen virtually. So that's what it is. So I hope I answered the question right? That's what you were asking, right, Michael?
Yeah, I think so, because we have a lot of folks that are asking or thinking about, like you said at the top of your answer, do we go redo everything, or do we kind of work with what we have? And I think the reality is that's what we have to do. Okay. And that's okay. Vistop, I want to ask you, so as you're thinking about new projects, future projects that are maybe you're planning now or is in the pipeline, so what questions or considerations are you thinking about now that would be different than when you were thinking about it in January?
So I think it's been a total reboot of the mind. One has to actually ask a different set of questions, because as we all have really understood, the game has changed. The goalpost, is nowhere around. It's suddenly a cricket match instead of a football match. I mean, for all you know. I think, there are 4 or 5 things that we typically talk about with clients nowadays, the ones who have surfaced, because a lot of projects are still comatose and are not really, rising up from the ashes. One of the first things is the ideological question. What are offices, meant to be now? There's a fundamental change, and we've been speaking about it. So, who are we making the office for? What's the purpose? Who's going to use it? I think these very basic questions need to be asked once again, because, I think this is more a time now when architects need to be involved in developing the brief. The second thing is, what are the morphological changes? How do you structure the office space now? given that the virus is going to be a long-term coexistence, and how do you really reset the spaces if you're given a chance? Thirdly, it's behavioral changes. I mean, we already talked about that. We talked about the trust deficit in the mind. We talked about forever having the scars of the virus. So how do you take care of behavioral changes, and how do you make people more in their comfort zone? The biggest challenge today is getting people back into offices and getting them into the comfort zone of the past, which is going to be a very difficult job. I think number 4 is how do you use technology and embrace it in a certain way so as to be able to make it seamless. I think by default we all have had no other choice. I think 6 months back, if people told us that we'd all be talking to each other in our own rooms and across the world, I think people would have said you're crazy. So I think that's technology, and the last is materiality. I think cleanable surfaces that sustain. I think a biophilic touch, bringing the outside inside, getting a lot more fresh air. I think these are all the changes. I mean, these are the things that are now going to be the new, power centers for office dialogue.
Thank you. Nadeem, what are a couple things that you're thinking about differently?
Yep. So Michael, being a business center company, so we are also rethinking. Earlier, what we used to do is that we used to design 20-25% of any center of ours as co-work, right? So that has been put on hold. I think we will still require collaborative spaces. We will still require co-working, but then the question mark is whether the employees, whether clients will need it 5 times a week. We think no. We think in near future, we may not require collaboration and shared spaces 5 times a week. Probably we may require it for a single day or maybe a couple of days. So we are thinking in that direction. A footprint of office of collaborative spaces may come down. What we are also thinking is whether these collaborative spaces can be makeshift. Whether we can have collapsible partitions, meeting rooms, private offices within these areas that can double up as collaborative spaces when needed. Similarly for meeting rooms as well. As an immediate step, what we've done is we've limited the usage of collaborative spaces. If we had a collaborative space of 30 workstations or 30 seats, we've reduced it to maybe 12 or 10 now, so that social distancing and physical distancing is maintained. Similarly, for offices within the offices, where we've got partitions and we've got private clients using our centers, there as well we've removed workstations, and we are mandating less usage of these offices, so as to maintain the physical distance, and also a lot of things on design as well. It's not only that you remove inventories. It is also you have to take a look at the traffic within the center. So if you come to any of our centers now, you will see that there are clear indications, stickers on floor, which basically also say the rotation and the traffic movement within the center, so that people do not cross each other that frequently as they used to do earlier. So a lot of things are working. We are still rethinking as to how we come up with a good cohesive design plan for our future co-working spaces.
Right, Eric, I want to ask slightly more targeted to you. What are the kind of couple top things that are being discussed about collaboration and shared spaces in the US right now?
Thanks. Many of the things that the rest of the panel have brought up are factors that people are thinking about in this country. One of the things that has been brought up recently is if we're not going to get together, say in a big conference room to meet, how are we going to make that work? And Nivi alluded to this. While you may have everybody coming into the office or a group coming into the office, they're not all going to be in the meeting room necessarily when you're having a meeting. So how is technology that supports collaboration going to be more flexibly distributed around the office, so it can support meetings taking place in different locations? I mean, that's That's a technology issue. It's a power issue. It's a visual and acoustic issue. So how are we going to do that from a physical, from that perspective? The other thing I'm finding is when this all started 90, 120 days ago, not surprisingly, organizations were kind of in panic mode. Oh my God, what do I do today? And we're finally past that point. Yeah, there's a little bit of it still now, but organizations are now more thinking about, okay, we've got to be functioning effectively, as we used earlier, in 2022. That's where we've got to be headed. Now let's think about what we need to do to get there. And when you think about collaboration spaces, it is looking at how they can take what they've already got and make it more flexible, make it so that it can be more easily adapted to support different functions and different groups of people based on how they need to work together. And there's an increased awareness that all collaboration is not the same. People there are different ways people work together. Doing that brainstorming iterative session is very different than sharing knowledge and looking over a document. That's a very different way of collaborating, and the same technology in the same space does not necessarily support all of those the same. So really acknowledging those variances is something we're beginning to look at more.
Yeah, and I think a few of you talked about flexibility, and maybe you'd said how this is speeding up a lot of things. And so I think inherently we knew we wanted to be agile and flexible. We certainly talked about it a lot, but now, boy, we're really under the gun to really figure it out right now. Raul, can you put up the next poll? This is kind of a fun one, and I have a visual aid for you. I don't know if you guys can see me because the poll is probably blocking my face. But here I have next to my desk my Clorox wipes and my hand sanitizer. So if the spray bottle and the sanitizer are nearby the collaborative spaces, the shared spaces you're working at, would you be willing to clean and disinfect a table in a shared space before or after using it? And why people are doing this quick poll? Great question in the chat. It's quite a direct question. Is collaboration really such a big deal? And then goes on to talk about it's not a default human setting like being eco-friendly. It's important for some types of work, but not for other. So is collaboration for the sake of collaboration? Is it really so vital for all kinds of work? And maybe you kind of touched on this a little bit about the future. So I'm curious what your take is on this.
So I think collaboration is a good need. You talked about human factor, right? We all need social interaction, and social interaction, whether for work or just to talk to a colleague or whatever. I think in companies like mine, collaboration is a big deal. We all work with collaboration and stuff. And he's right, the person who asked this question, is if you're an engineer or you're doing something on your own, you really don't need to collaborate. It's not a big deal. You don't need it. So it depends on the culture of the company and the culture of how you work. I think that's why, that's what I think. So I don't know, any other panelists have any other opinions on this?
Well, I'd like to add there. I'd say that, for those of us who, work in a team sport, we need 11 players for a football game. Likewise, you need, different people for, doing the different parts of a job in a studio. Unfortunately, I think the days of a star architect are over. I think we all rely and work more in teams. And I think teams need to meet. And there's only this much that you can do across the screen. And it really gets to you. You'd rather be talking to the walls than talking to your monitor all the time. And I think there is a lot of people in our office who are dying to come back. And it's just that they want to feel a little more safe. So I'd say, yes, we do need to collaborate, and we do need to find intelligent ways of collaborating. The most silly thing that I find is when people come into an office and they're talking to each other on the monitor because they've got so used to it and they feel very safe. So someone sitting in the open work hall, I'm sitting here and we're talking to each other. So look, why are we coming to office? And the other ridiculous thing is that if we are sitting and facing each other, we're wearing masks. We're wearing masks because we understand that that's the way to, keep each other safe. But why don't we come up with some sort of barriers in the middle that allow us to remove our masks? Because it's not just the eyes, it's what you talk, it's the way you communicate. And I think I'm not against masks, but I'm saying communication is such a serious business. It requires the whole face to be seen. And you don't get the niceties of you don't get the subtle hints of a conversation unless you're having it in an open manner. So I think as architects, as designers, as everyone, we need to come up with very creative solutions that allow collaboration to happen, because hey, otherwise you don't need an office. You're not going to come to office and be sitting on your own desks.
Yeah, and I think that's great, because the things that we do, the things that we put in place are not, they're just facilitating the most important thing, which is relationships and the communication and the work and the productivity. And so there's all great questions. I really appreciate that. Thank you for the question, by the way, from the audience.
Michael, so within our centers, if you see any of our typical collaborative spaces, you will not only find employees from set companies, established companies. You will find a lot of startups. You will find a lot of young employees who've just started their careers, maybe in a team of one and two, and they're exploring. They're exploring. So we actually foster them to meet up with other co-working clients. So that's how the social interaction that happens at a co-working place is not necessarily within the companies. It's basically from employees of other companies as well. That's where they share ideas. That's where collaboration actually takes place, not only within the firm but obviously with other companies as well, right? So yeah, I think it is collaborative spaces are important for Vista's, an architecture firm. If he works in in silos, and if his employee have to work within private offices, I don't know how he's going to function. So yeah, it's going to be difficult for such companies. But companies like advertising, companies who are into sales, big or small, I think they do require a lot of collaborative spaces. So hence we say that collaboration spaces are here to stay. But then in near future, we'll probably be looking at how many times in a week a collaboration is needed. Probably once, twice, not every day, maybe.
Great, thank you. We took a little bit longer on that session. Sorry about that. Raul, can you pop the result up on the poll? Okay, so similar. We had, I think, 97% this morning on this one, and here it was 85%. I expected it to be a little bit different here, and I think it's also, there's a lot of cultural issues that are happening, and the way offices are supported are different in Singapore and Hong Kong, I think, than they are in India in a lot of cases, from what I've observed when I've been visiting. So that was interesting, a little bit of difference, so I like that. So just wanted to talk a little bit about the human component. So surveys have shown that there's still a significant percentage of workers who are not quite ready to go back, to return to the office. We saw a few people in the first poll talk about that. In collaboration areas in particular, so what are they seeing? What does it feel like? What will be different, or what will be the same than when they're coming back to work, or when they came back to work in the cases where some of your organizations have come back already? So I'd like to have Vistap answer that first.
Well, I think, the biggest question in today's debate is, how do you make collaborative spaces safe? Because we've just established that you cannot do away with them. And the more I think about it, there's just one solution. Apart from the barriers and apart from other things that could screen people from each other, I think it's more about learning to talk in a softer manner, because every scientist talks about the fact that the louder you speak, the more it is that you are discharging something that you should not be discharging. And you really need to maybe use microphones or stuff that can allow you to talk that much softer and be able to address a group who feels safer. I think we've all talked about masks. We've forgotten something called face shields. face shields are perhaps, the most underutilized, piece of equipment that's come out in the PPE gear. I think face shields, if they could only be made more comfortable for people who wear glasses, I think are a fantastic, a way of collaborating and being safer. Um, I think if we were to attend to the way we communicate, we could, bring back collaboration in the way it, needs to be. Because I think the most absurd thing is to be having people standing so far away from each other, and that you're, having to, talk in a very loud manner. I think you need a lot of technology, and you need to integrate technology into your collaborative spaces now. And that will change everything back to normal.
Great. Nadeem, I'm curious, you're dealing with an interesting situation that is a little bit different in that you're dealing with tenants or members that are occupying your spaces. So in that situation, do you think that they will actively and willing to participate in keeping the spaces the way you intended them, following the rules, clean and disinfected? How is that working for you?
So thankfully for us, because of the clientele that we host in our centers, we are not facing issues on that front. We've seen clients who are cooperating. However, what we feel is it is important that we keep the self awareness. We keep at it. We need to promote self awareness so that clients themselves understand how they need to behave and how they need to interact within a business center. From our end, what we're doing is, if you come to any of our centers, you will see a lot of posters, a lot of visual references, which keep saying that you need to maintain physical distances. What are the manners that you need to be using the offices? So you'll see a lot of references all around our centers now. And thankfully, we've been lucky that we've had no such issues from clients, and they're behaving pretty well.
Yeah, that's a good trend. I'm happy to see that there's a lot of cooperation. I think we learned a lot staying at home, and maybe we're appreciative to get back to the office as well.
Yeah, you never know, so in instances where clients, don't behave, then you always have somebody operating out of these centers from our team who can, softly tell them, okay, this is, what is needed, and this is, this is a request. So we've not faced that yet, but we should be ready for anything that can happen in a center.
Speaking of softly telling, Eric, how do you, that Wall Street Journal article, actually, I mentioned earlier, the quote that jumped out at me is someone said, "She's so close, I can smell her gum, the gum she's chewing," which I thought was quite funny. But so how do you, in an environment with people you need to work with and collaborate with, and they get too close, how do you communicate to sort of back away? How do you deal with that?
Well, it's the key is to allow your employees or facilitate the opportunity for employees to talk about that situation before it happens. Bring people together and say, the reality is that this is new to everybody, and somebody is going to forget because they're totally thinking about their job. They come around the corner and they slam into you. They're not being mean or anything, they're just focused. So you need to be able to talk to a peer in a way that is not rude and unpleasant and aggressive. And so think about how you can do that within your organization, within your culture. The example we gave yesterday was, I live in Phoenix, which is in the middle of the desert. And how do you turn to somebody and say, you're too close? Well, in the desert, there are people talking about turning to somebody and saying rattlesnake, because if you live in the desert, if you're out on a trail and you see a rattlesnake, you back off because it's not safe. There are other ways you can do that as well. There was somebody on the call this morning that suggests saying adult kangaroo. Now, I'm not from Australia. That doesn't really resonate with me, but if that resonates in Australia, think about something like that that allows you to share your concern and your desire to have distance, but in a way that is personable, funny, takes advantage of your organization's sense of humor if they have a sense of humor and something that's culturally relevant. But you have to give people the opportunity to figure that out in a safe way.
Great, thank you. Raul, can we put the next poll up? So this one is, if you or your company were considering alternative or sort of spaces that aren't your main office, such as co-working or shared offices, what would be the most important quality you'd like to see in those spaces? And you can select as many as apply to you that you're thinking about. I think, real quick question. Someone had asked, one of the other reasons to come back to the office is socializing. And one of the questions was, we have game rooms, music rooms as part of our offices. How do we deal, how should these spaces be modified and the spirit still retained? Anyone want to raise their hand on that one?
Well, the purpose of rooms like that is not specifically to play a game. The purpose of rooms like that is to illustrate that the organization is saying it's okay to get up and not do something that is directly work related. It's okay to get up and move around, to do something that you enjoy and you bring that to work. So they may need to be adapted for social distancing. I mean, you can probably play ping pong and still maintain your social distancing, but some things you may not be able to. But organizations, if thinking about people being more mobile, it may not be that you go into a game room to play, but it's okay to go out and walk around outside for 10 minutes with a colleague or something like that. But the idea is it's okay to move, to relax, to take a break, because we all need to do that. Here are spaces to do that. So I don't think they're going to go away. They may just need to be physically rethought so that they maintain social distancing.
I'd like to add, Michael, to what Eric's saying. I think if spaces for community usage could be reimagined as spaces for isolated usage, or spaces which are, which force you to meditate a little bit more, I think they'd still do the same job, because I think, people need their own space, and they need spaces like this to go off to have a breakout, or to try and relax and to work better. One of the things that I feel is to, start putting, nice large plants at every 2 meters or 1.5 meters from each other. Have a nice easy chair in the middle, rearrange your furniture, start having physical obstacles that keep you away from each other, and yet at the same time allow you to relax. So I think there would be smarter ways that we develop as we go along, because this is going to be a long time, and we're going to find ways out of this.
Well, and I think that when you said physical, what did you say? Not barriers, whatever you just said. I also see them as reminders, right? And it's sort of a cue, whoa, and hopefully when you see that plant or the positioning of that solitary chair, it reminds you, okay, I need to think about myself. Because I think a lot of us, when we were working from home, we lost that during that period of time for sure.
Sure.
Yeah. Raul, the results, sorry, forgot about that. Let's see, oh, okay, interesting. Of all the things, number one is clear policies on office use, cleaning, and distancing. Of all of those, I think that's really fascinating that was the number one answer. And again, that's that safety issue again that keeps coming up over and over and over again, which is sort of Maslow, right? The Maslow hierarchy of needs. I want to feel safe first. If I don't feel safe, I can't move up the triangle. So I think that's really important. The other one I think is really interesting, 32% said locations closer to my home, and we'll get to that in a second. That's another one we're hearing a lot about as well, is if these spaces were located more conveniently to where I live, would they be more valuable? Would the proposition be better for me? So let's talk a little bit about those dedicated spaces, co-working and shared offices. So I'd like to start this with Nadine then. So is the value proposition changing at all for you? What the factors we've been discussing about these environments, has it sort of changed how you're selling or talking about or explaining what you have to offer?
Yes, so it is going to change definitely. In near future, it is going to change. The co-working in the shared spaces that we currently have. So we are rethinking on how best to manage the furnitures there within those areas, keeping the physical distancing in mind. We will obviously the footprint of usability, employees using these spaces will come down because of the physical distancing that we want to achieve. However, still going forward, if you see any of our center offices within the offices is the concept that we've been following, right? So we feel that offices within the offices, shared and private offices mostly are going to have a lot of traction. Clients and employees will still want to use offices which they feel is safe. However, for collaborative and for shared spaces, I think we will still need to, as time goes forward, we'll have to still design. Architects will have to work on solutions, which basically, makes the client feel confident to come to the centers and work. The biggest challenge that we have is to bring in the confidence within the clients to operate out of our centers. So that's the challenge that we have. Obviously, there are design inputs that are coming in. We are reshifting, replanning our co-working spaces so that that confidence can be given back to the clients to come and start working from these areas.
So Vistop, if you're thinking about these sorts of spaces, how, thinking about the purpose of them, the relevancy of them, you were kind of talking that about a little bit about earlier. How would you kind of think about the purpose and explaining the purpose of these spaces?
So I think it's perhaps the most difficult thing for shared workspaces to convey the sense of safety to the end user, and I think that's going to be a number one challenge. I think I think there are two parts to your question. I think for existing spaces, I think it's more about de-densification of the spaces. It's more about divisioning, demarcating public versus more private spaces. I think people are going to be a little more averse using the public spaces unless they see rigors of cleaning and disinfection happening around. I think there are, for the private spaces, I think people can be, trusted to look after their own little spaces and maintain, the kind of distancing that they need. There are new technologies that are in also that need to be harnessed, stuff like, UV lighting that can actually disinfect a room within 3 to 4 minutes. I think there's great need. There are a lot of vendors who are beginning to develop lighting that's integrated with, this disinfecting light. So you have a meeting or you have a usage of a space, you come out of it when there's no human being in, you turn on the UV light for 3-4 minutes. So I think there are processes and there are available methods which the hospitality industry is really beginning to lean towards that we need to learn from. And I think the hospitality industry has learned from the hospital industry. So I think every industry is teaching each other, and we just need to be receptive to these ideas to welcome people back and make them more safe.
So Nivi, you were talking, you sort of know that a lot of companies like yours are going to have a certain percentage that are going to be work from home permanently over time. So, and you mentioned earlier that the primary use of the office will be collaboration in the future. So would you think that a lot of these offices will resemble more of a co-working sort of environment rather than where there's less focused work and more collaborative work? Will that sort of overall change the makeup of your offices?
So temporarily, yes. So like I'm looking at it like I spoke this morning. It's a now, near, and future kind of a scenario, right? So for now, yes, they might look like co-working spaces, but For long term, I'm personally skeptical if working remotely will be norm for most. Like the pre-C19 numbers were around 4%, a bit, 4% actually meaning 4% of the US employees were working from home for more than half their time. But I think it'll increase, but how much will it increase? We don't know, right? Whilst COVID-19 has certainly helped drive the increase for remote work, I doubt this will be a massive new norm for everybody, like maybe for a few organizations. We talked about that before, like ours. However, there will be some shift towards using the office to collaborate, as employees and employers have recently realized that work from home can be a good substitute to get some focus work done. So the office environment will have to find a few new things, new ways of working. We know the home office is here to stay, so we allow for virtual collaboration wherever possible. Definitely, these collaborative spaces should have resilience, flexibility. At this point, it's hard to predict where the future is going. So stay flexible as possible. Flexible, adaptable are the keywords, and then safety. Given the uncertainty of the situation, the circumstances are changing really quickly, right? So again, flexible, adaptable spaces and the applications can be great asset. Rethinking tools and technology within these collaborative spaces, including video conference technology, wherever possible. All these are things which will definitely help in the collaboration area. So yeah, I think they would look like co-working spaces now, but I think as we go in, if we can adapt and make these flexible, that would be really a great way to go for collaborative spaces.
Recurring theme throughout our talk today: flexibility and agility and adaptability. So it seems to be the most important thing. We're drawing to the end of our hour, so I wanted to ask sort of as we used to say in the old days, the $64,000 question. Inflation has risen that one up in recent years, but we're seeing a lot of discussion about this in LinkedIn and other places. Will collaborative spaces increase or decrease in size? And so we just want your very quick answer, not paragraph, sentence, if you can. So I'd like to start with Nadeem on this.
So near future, yes, might shrink a bit, but going ahead, we may come back to the same situation as of now, as of today.
Stop.
Well, we're going to learn to live with the virus, and offices are going to be the new work clubs. So you're going to decide which day you want to go to your work club and when do you have to go. So, there's definitely not going to be an increase. Offices are going to stay, shared spaces and collaborative spaces are going to stay.
Nivi.
Oh, I said that before, and that it depends on the company's culture and what they have as collaborative spaces. So I feel they'll stay the same in some cases. Just how you work in them and how you orient them and how you change them, that planning part will change a bit. But in general, they'll probably stay the same. And for certain companies, they may increase if they don't have enough of them right now.
And Eric.
I agree with what everybody said. I think the key underlying thing is they're going to be more flexible because they're going to have to support different ways of working together. And so the total might be the same, but how you use them and how they're put together will be different.
Yeah, it was interesting in the session this morning. It was more on the side of more collaborative spaces, which I thought was quite interesting, especially from the design side. And so it's a little bit slightly different answer, but really fascinating. What I didn't hear from anybody is they're going to go away. It's going to reduce. So I think and there's a lot of gloom and doom talking about that. And we know that's not true. And because we know why it's important, which is why we did this session today, is to sort of understand more about this really important issue that is really critical to the success of our businesses and our clients' businesses. So we really appreciate all of you who attended today, all of you who asked questions. Thank you. Sorry if we didn't get to all your questions. And then to the panelists, thank you, Nivi, Nadeem, Mistap, and Eric. We really appreciate this. I think this is one of the best discussions we've had in our webinars. It's really, really informative and really current, and we really appreciate your time today.
Lovely being here. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting.
Thank you.
And then, like in the past, we will post the video of this on LinkedIn. So please do look for that as well. And please share with your colleagues that couldn't make it today.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.